Hello, friends, students, colleagues, and C# learners. This is Dr. Satish Singhal, PhD, from Computer Information Technology Department at Rose State College in Midwest City, near Oklahoma City in Oklahoma. Today I'm going to talk about passing to C# functions the default arguments. Of course, C# calls them methods, but functions is another name. Okay. So let's talk about first what are the default arguments. Well, ordinarily the number and data type of arguments passed to functions must map with the parameters in the function header. Okay. And for example, when function print student with header below is called, the first call argument must be a string value, and actually let's see what those are. The second an integer value, third a double value, and all three arguments must be provided. You cannot skip any of them. So if I have a method like this one, static void print student, first argument is name, which is string type. Second argument is age, which is int type. Third argument is double, which is name GPA is the double type. So all three, when function call or method call is made, all three must be provided. We cannot skip any of those. But what if at many times when method is to be called, the value of one or more parameters for many of the method call we are going to make is same? What is the example of that? We'll give an example in a minute, but in that case coding labor is cut down if method is called and when the method is called, value of one or more parameters is assumed without inputting them in the method call. For example, let us take a look at the print student again. This is the header of the method. Imagine that for all the students who are freshly admitted, the GPA will be 0.0, right? Because they have not really started anything yet. So their GPA will be 0.0. And it would be laborious to print their data and make a method call as below for each of the freshmen in the first semester. Like, of course I have to provide the name, age, name here, so name has got to match with this one, age has got to match with this one, and GPA has got to match with this one. So I can use some pointers here. So this one must match with this. There's a match between those two, and there has to be a match here, and there's got to be a match for the GPA. Okay, but this is same for every student who has been freshly admitted in the first semester, and they're a freshman. So last parameter 0.0 is same for every freshman in the first semester. So would it not be labor saving that for all freshmen in the first semester we can call the print student method with this type of syntax, that we just leave out the 0.0 entirely, the third argument, and we just provide the 2. Okay, which means the default value is assumed for the third one. So we are hoping the third parameter GPA is automatically set to 0.0 and filled out for us when we make the call for all the freshmen. Well, C# fortunately has a technology of passing default argument to the methods, and that will allow us to do exactly what we are hoping. we can code C# function method print student in a way that last argument will be given a default value and the value that we want to give it. Okay, there are other reasons for providing default arguments, and those reasons are as follows. We may also want to fill out some data value for arguments because data was not available at the time of the method call. And database technology is very fortunate in doing that, that when some data are not available, they fill out a null value for that. You could do that for all data except the primary key. We're not so fortunate programming technology unless you declare the value types to be nullable and null value is not available, but we can use some other value and make some decisions based on that. Okay, for example, if student forgot to fill out their age in the admissions form, then we can pass a default value for age at 0, indicating that age was not provided, just forgot. Okay. And now we're going to go to Visual Studio and code the function print student for C# and show other rules of default arguments. And we'll come back to this PowerPoint to illustrate them one more time and make some last few arguments. Okay, so let's go to Visual Studio. Okay, so that's the Visual Basic one. Here's the C#. So I have a method here, print student, and right now it's taking the age 0 in case that is not provided. So 0 is the default value for the age and 0.0 is the default value for GPA. So we have default value for second parameter and the third, but not for the first one. And that's allowed. You can pick and choose, starting all the way from extreme right and moving on to the left. You can pick and choose arguments that you want to give default value to. And there is a rule about that, of course. We'll talk about that rule in a minute. But let's see how this one works. Okay, so let's look at the code in a little bit more detail. Name we print as is. We say here are the student data, and the 0th argument is a line break, environment.newLine, and the first argument 1, actually not the first argument, index 1 is the name. So whatever name is passed here will be printed here. Okay. But age 0 has a default value of 0, so when default value is passed, we should say something about that. So we have this if statement here. If age equals 0, I write that student has forgotten to enter age. Actually, word yet is not necessary in their data. So we do that. Otherwise, if age is not a default value, we just print the age. Okay, so print the age, and 0th index argument is age. Now GPA could have two possibilities. It has a default value. In that case, we print this one. The GPA is this value, which is 0.0, because student is a freshman in first semester, doesn't have the GPA yet. Otherwise, we'll just print the GPA. And lastly, I have this line separator. So let's see how this function call works. Okay. So here in the main, I have 3 calls to the print student. Actually, let's reverse the process. Let's put this one in the top and go one at a time, and this in the middle, which will be a little bit better. Okay, so the first call has all the explicit argument. There's a name, Tim Johnson, passed to the name parameter, age 29 passed to the age parameter, 3.1 for GPA passed to the GPA parameter. Okay, so all three arguments are explicit. Default value will not be used when we are passing the explicit argument. But let's take a look at the second call here. Name is explicit, Lisa Adams, so name will be passed here. Age is also explicit, so age 23 will be passed here, so default value will not be used. But notice there is no third parameter for GPA. So in that case, what C# will do, it will use the 0.0, the default value for the third parameter. Okay. Whereas in the last function call, only name is provided, which is the explicit value for the name, but argument 2 and 3 are missing, so default value will be 0, will be used for age, and default value 0.0 will be used for the GPA. And notice there are no red lines, so that means this program will compile. So let's compile and run it. We have made few changes, so let's compile it. And it's going to be a little slow. Anytime we make the movies, whole thing slows down, but not too slow. And here's the results. So for the first student, Tim Jamison, we had the three explicit arguments. So name is printed, Tim Jamison, age is printed 29, right there, and GPA 3.1 is printed as 3.10 because we had given a format to extend 2 decimal place for GPA. It's right here, see? We set to the program that print GPA, which is the 0th index, as 2 decimal point. Okay, let's see the second call here, Lisa Adams. So name was passed as an explicit argument, that's printed Lisa Adams right there. Age was passed as an explicit argument of 23, that's printed here. But notice the GPA was missed, so in that case the default value 0.0 that was passed in the function header, method header, is assumed, and that's printed here because the student is a freshman in the first semester. In the third function call, third method call, we just have the name only, and we are expecting that default value will be assumed for age and GPA, and our results show exactly the same thing, that only name was explicit, so that's printed here as James, but age says that students forgotten to enter age in their data, so age 0 was entered as a default argument, and then this if statement executes in that case. Okay, we're not saying that age is 0, but we're telling that student forgot to enter their age. And then the third argument is missing also, so default value 0.0 is taken for that right here, and that's printed also GPA 0.0 because student is a freshman in first semester. Okay, so that's, in short words, that's the story of the default arguments. We want to tell you one rule that C# has to follow about default arguments. For that, we go back to PowerPoint, explain few things, and come back to Visual Studio to demo that one more time. So let's go to this slide here. So there are some rules about default arguments, and I want to emphasize this indexing system in computer science. It doesn't matter what you're dealing with. You might be dealing with arrays, you might be dealing with the tuples, you might be dealing with order of function arguments, any such thing, or indexing of characters in a string. If we index arguments from left to right, then we can say that first argument has index of 0, and I want to emphasize this fact one more time. The indexing starts with 0, numbering starts with 1. Okay, so indexing and numbering is not the same thing. Index always starts with 0, number always starts with 1, or more if you like. So assume that first argument has index of 0, second argument has index of 1, third argument has index of 2, and so on. So we index the argument that way, although I'm not sure it's noted somewhere in the computer, but we can assume that. So this is the rule about default arguments. If default value is provided to the argument with index n, then all arguments with index greater than n also must have default value. Okay, and we want to demo that. So we go back to Visual Studio. So here I gave index 1 a default value, so index 2 was also given a default value. Let's try to delete that and see what happens. All of a sudden this red line, and it says optional parameter must appear after all required parameter. So, and notice that these two method calls became illegal all of a sudden. Okay, and it says no overload for method print student takes to argument. So meaning of that is that since I gave default value to the argument at index 1, I cannot leave out a default value for argument at index 2. I have to provide it. Okay, and also I cannot pick and choose. There is an order to it. I cannot pick and choose like this, that I provide a default value here, let's say not given, and skip, actually equal sign has to be there, skip this one, and then come back and do again for this one. Here again we have that error message and the red line. So here C# is telling us that okay, you cannot give default argument just to the index 0, then you got to give to index 1 and index 2, all of them. Okay, so that's the very important rule that you have to remember when passing the default arguments. Okay, and that's pretty much the story of default argument passed to the methods in C#. Okay, so rule is, if default value is provided to the argument with index n, then all arguments with index greater than n should have default value as well. Okay, and that's the end. If we index argument from left to right, then we can say, actually we already covered that, so that's the end. Thank you for watching and listening. Bye.